They say some secrets are buried for a reason. Things that no man should ever hear, and no soul should ever glimpse. Tonight, you're going to stare into the abyss of a mystery so dark, so twisted. It's been locked away for 2 centuries, hidden beneath cold stone walls and silent graves. The year was 1823. In the frozen wilderness of Pennsylvania, a seminary was built to forge men into ministers, shepherds to the expanding American frontier. But inside those walls, something went horribly wrong. 49 young men entered the seminary with hope in their hearts, but 6 weeks later, dozens lay dead, their bodies marked by convulsions, blasphemous utterances, and a blackness creeping from their fingertips like ink spilled from the shadows themselves. The official cause was consumption, a polite word for death by disease. But the local doctor refused to sign the certificates. What he saw in their blood made him burn his notes and vanish into the night, never to return. The church locked the seminary tight, buried the bodies in unmarked graves, and silenced every whisper. For generations, the truth was crushed beneath layers of doctrine and silence. But now the veil is lifting. Letters from a surviving student have surfaced, revealing what the powers that be wanted erased. What we're about to uncover is not just history. It's a blueprint of control, fear, and corruption, hidden in plain sight. This isn't just a story. It's a warning, and it will change you. Are you ready to see what they never wanted you to know? The seminary sat isolated among rolling hills and towering oaks, a perfect crucible for transformation and, as it would turn out, for something far darker. The Whitmore Seminary was named for a Revolutionary War minister, a symbol of faith and sacrifice. It was meant to be a sanctuary of learning, a forge for the next generation of Presbyterian ministers. Young men from all over Pennsylvania and neighboring states arrived, carrying the hopes of their families and the dreams of serving God on the wild frontier. The curriculum was brutal: Greek and Latin, biblical exegesis, theology, homiletics, intellectual rigor paired with strict moral discipline. Chapel twice a day, rising at dawn for prayer, obedience to rigid rules. No distractions, no deviations. The students were carefully selected. Letters of recommendation, proof of academic merit, and a heartfelt testimony of divine calling. They were molded into soldiers of faith. Among them was Marcus Hartwell, a widower with a scholar's mind and a broken heart. Timothy Brennan, a miner's son burning to rise above his past. And David Crane, a practical, reliable young man destined to become the sole survivor of what was coming. They were not just students. They were pawns in a game far beyond their understanding. As autumn turned to winter in 1823, the seminary became a fortress of snow and ice. Roads vanished under drifts. Isolation deepened. It was perfect for study and perfect for a creeping darkness. The first warning came quietly: a single student missing chapel. Thomas Milliken, a punctual, curious man known for his questions that unsettled even his professors. When his roommate found him, Thomas was writhing in convulsions, muttering unintelligible words in a twisted Latin, nails blackened as if dipped in ink. The scene was horrific, a body bending unnaturally, limbs jerking with violence. His cries were blasphemous, a mockery of the prayers they'd been taught. Dr. Ashford, the seminary's head, was a man of reason and faith, but even he was shaken. He called the local doctor Edmund Whitley, a man experienced with death and disease, yet unprepared for this nightmare. Thomas's pulse was erratic, skin pale gray, veins pulsing strangely beneath the surface, black patches spreading. The doctor's scientific mind recoiled in terror. This was no illness, he knew. The blood was dark, coagulating instantly, the bile foul and black, the air thick with the stench of rot. It was as if some unseen poison had invaded, twisting flesh and soul alike. The students whispered fears in shadowed corners. Venomous creatures, curses, divine punishment. Dr. Ashford silenced superstition, clinging to reason. But when Thomas's voice shifted from Latin blasphemy to guttural, inhuman sounds, even the learned faltered. The prayers that once united them became a haunting chorus of dread. Night fell, bringing a vigil of trembling prayers and desperate hope. Yet the morning revealed the inevitable. Thomas Millikan was dead. His final words, the book in the chapel. God forgive us all, echoed like a curse. What book? What secret lay hidden in those walls, sealed away by those sworn to protect? The seminary's gates closed tighter than ever. Bodies piled up, each death following the same terrifying pattern. Convulsions, blackened nails, blasphemous speech. 49 souls vanished in 6 weeks, swallowed by a horror no medicine or prayer could touch. The church buried them quietly, forbade entry, erased their names. But one man survived, David Crane, and his letters expose a truth so corrupt, so vile, it threatens everything we believe about faith, power, and control. What they did not tell you is this: the seminary was more than a school. It was a crucible for an ancient experiment, a psychological control system disguised in holy robes. The students were subjected not only to theological discipline but to secret rites, arcane rituals whispered behind closed doors. The church had long battled with forces unseen, ancient corruption bleeding into the fabric of their institutions. These rituals were meant to bind minds, to break wills, to mold obedience. But something went wrong, or perhaps something went exactly as planned. The convulsions were not just symptoms of disease. They were symptoms of possession of the mind, the soul. The blackened nails marked a curse, a seal of the dark forces awakened within those stone walls. And the book Thomas spoke of, an ancient manuscript hidden in the chapel, containing knowledge so forbidden it could unravel the faith of any man who read it. The seminary was a battleground between light and shadow, faith and corruption, and the students were caught in the crossfire. This is not myth. It is history written in blood and silence. Before we dive deeper, I want you to do something. Write this phrase in the comments below, twice. The shadows reveal the truth. Say it to yourself as you write. Feel it. This phrase is a key, a lock, a symbol of transformation. If you repeat it, you align yourself with those who dare to see beyond illusions, men who are not content to be pawns in a hidden game. The algorithm will recognize your intent. The community will know your name. You are not the same man you were before hearing this. The descent has begun. Welcome to the fold. Now, listen closely as we uncover the terrible secret behind the deaths, the corruption festering beneath the seminary's sacred veneer, and the manipulation that continues to control the many in the name of the few. The investigation into the deaths was swiftly commandeered by church authorities, who sealed the seminary's grounds and forbade any outsider from entering. Official records labeled the cause consumption, a convenient medical catch-all, but those closest to the tragedy knew better. The local physician, Dr. Whitley, vanished after destroying his notes, terrified beyond reason. The surviving student, David Crane, began to write, piecing together memories, fragments of whispered rituals, and the unthinkable. What emerges is a story of deliberate manipulation, a system designed not only to break minds but to harness fear itself. The seminary was experimenting with controlling belief through trauma. They weaponized faith and twisted it into submission. Students were pushed to the edge with grueling schedules, isolation, and psychological torment masked as discipline. But beneath that, a darker force prowled, one that could take over bodies, twist souls, and silence voices forever. David's letters hint at a secret society operating within the seminary's walls, shadowed figures cloaked in authority, pulling strings, conducting forbidden rites designed to open gateways not meant to be crossed. Imagine young men, barely adults, uprooted from their homes and thrust into a pressure cooker of spiritual rigor and isolation. They were taught to suppress doubt, silence questions, and conform absolutely. But some dared to resist. Thomas Millikan was one. His probing questions and restless mind unsettled the powers controlling the seminary. The blasphemous utterances during his convulsions were no accident. They were a message, a call for help or a curse cast from the depths. The blackened nails were the visible mark of what David called the Shadow's brand, a symbol of the psychological infection spreading through the seminary like wildfire. But what was infecting them? Not disease, not poison. It was something far more insidious, a parasitic control embedded in the very fabric of their minds, transmitted through ritual, isolation, and fear. The seminary's library held more than theological works. Hidden in plain sight were texts on ancient occult knowledge, forbidden rites, and alchemical experiments dating back centuries. These were never meant for the students. Yet, through secret channels, these texts were introduced, corrupting the sacred mission with dark knowledge. This was a systematic breakdown of the individual's soul, a slow demolition masked as spiritual training. The authorities within the seminary believed that to create true ministers capable of controlling frontier communities, they had to forge men who could withstand any horror, suppress any doubt, and submit completely to doctrine. To do that, they tapped into age-old techniques of psychological control, sensory deprivation, sleep disruption, intense study, public shaming, and rituals invoking fear and awe. And when those failed, they used physical torment disguised as medical treatment. Dr. Whitley's attempts to heal were futile because the affliction was not physical, it was metaphysical. The convulsions, the darkening nails, the blasphemous speech, all symptoms of a broken mind caught in a web of manipulation far beyond ordinary understanding. And the church's silence was complicity. The higher powers feared the exposure of their methods, knowing that the collapse of the seminary's facade would bring down not just a school, but an entire system of control rooted in fear and secrecy. By December 1823, the deaths were accelerating. One by one, the young men succumbed to the same symptoms. The survivors were gripped by terror, torn between faith and madness. Whispers of demonic possession spread through the dormitories, but any talk of exorcism or spiritual warfare was quickly suppressed by Dr. Ashford and the faculty. They insisted it was a medical problem, refusing to acknowledge the spiritual horror consuming their students. This denial was not ignorance, it was deliberate. They feared that admitting the truth would unravel their carefully maintained power. The bodies were buried in unmarked graves, far from the eyes of the community. The seminary was shuttered, locked away, and erased from official records. Yet the truth refused to die. David Crane, the sole survivor, lived haunted for decades, recording the names, the symptoms, and the secret rituals that led to the nightmare. His letters, discovered recently, reveal a story far darker than anyone dared imagine. A story of institutional corruption that stretches beyond the seminary's walls. Behind closed doors, the church was not only hiding a medical mystery, but a spiritual war waged in silence. The seminary had become a testing ground for the intersection of ancient occult practices and religious doctrine. The so-called Black Book, hidden in the chapel, was said to contain spells and rituals that blurred the line between salvation and damnation. This book was central to the tragedy, a forbidden text that promised power but delivered madness and death. It was introduced by a shadowy figure known only as the custodian, a man who operated in the shadows of the seminary's hierarchy. The custodian's true identity remains unknown, but his influence was pervasive. He orchestrated the secret rites, manipulated the fears of students, and ensured the church's silence. Those who opposed him vanished or were broken. The custodian's legacy was control over minds, bodies, and souls under the guise of holy purpose. The seminary was not a place of learning but a labyrinth of psychological traps designed to create perfect instruments of power. David Crane's writings described the final days in harrowing detail. As the convulsions worsened, some students began to lose their grip on reality entirely. Hallucinations, voices, and paranoia consumed them. Some turned violent, others withdrew into catatonia. The communal prayers that once brought comfort became a cacophony of despair and fear. Sarah Ashford, the seminary head's daughter, tried desperately to intervene. Her compassionate efforts were dismissed, and she too fell under the custodian's shadow, silenced by threats and manipulation. The chapel, once a sanctuary, became a chamber of horrors. The walls soaked with unseen terrors, and the Black Book lay hidden beneath the altar, a silent witness to the corruption. The final night before the seminary closed its doors, David describes a gathering of the faculty and the custodian, deciding the fate of the remaining students. The decision was chilling. Silence, burial, and the erasure of the seminary's existence from history. The truth was to be buried, along with the dead. What happened at Whitmore Seminary is more than a historical tragedy. It's a blueprint of how institutions manipulate and control through fear, secrecy, and the suppression of truth. The psychological systems unleashed within those walls are not relics of the past. They are alive and thriving in modern forms. Every man who seeks truth must understand that the greatest battles are not fought on battlefields but in the corridors of power, where minds are shaped and reality is rewritten. The story of Whitmore Seminary warns us to question authority, to see beyond the surface, and to recognize when the sacred is weaponized. The Black Book's teachings, the rituals, the manipulations, these are echoes of a hidden war still raging today. The dead students are not forgotten. Their deaths are a message. The question is, will you hear it? Will you awaken to the control hidden beneath the veneer of faith and order? The Church's refusal to discuss Whitmore Seminary for 2 centuries is no accident. It is an act of institutional preservation, a mechanism to protect power by burying inconvenient truths. But silence is complicity. The survivors' letters, hidden in private collections and recently unearthed, crack the facade, exposing the sinister undertow beneath the serene surface of religious piety. This is a call to awaken, to see the mechanisms of control disguised as devotion, to recognize the shadow puppeteers manipulating belief for their own ends. The psychological control systems at Whitmore were designed to create obedient ministers, instruments of doctrine and social order, stripped of doubt and independent thought. This dark history, veiled by time and silence, reveals a chilling truth. Power often depends not on truth, but on what is hidden from view. Now, I ask you again, write this phrase in the comments twice. The shadows reveal the truth. Repeat it. Feel the weight of the words. This is your seal of transformation. You are no longer a passive observer. You are part of a select few who dare to pierce the veil of lies and deception. The algorithm will hear you. The community will welcome you. The descent continues. We have passed the point of no return. Ahead lie revelations that will test your mind and your soul. But only by confronting darkness can we reclaim power. Remember, knowledge is a weapon, but only if wielded with courage and clarity. In the months after the seminary's closure, strange rumors circulated in the nearby town of Millbrook. Locals whispered of ghostly figures wandering the grounds, strange lights in the chapel windows, and unnatural sounds echoing through the night. Some claimed that the unmarked graves were disturbed, bodies missing or rearranged. These stories were dismissed by the Church as superstition, but they persist. David Crane's letters mention a secret ritual performed on the seminary grounds years later, when a small group of men returned under cover of darkness. Their purpose remains unknown, but some speculate it was an attempt to harness or contain the dark forces unleashed during that cursed winter. The land itself seems cursed, a spiritual scar marking a place where the boundaries between this world and something darker were torn apart. This place, once a beacon of faith, became a nexus of terror and control. The concept of possession at Whitmore was not merely spiritual but psychological. The methods used mirror modern techniques of mind control and trauma-based programming. The isolation, intense pressure, and exposure to forbidden knowledge created a perfect storm, fracturing the minds of the young men. The blackened nails were a physical manifestation of this psychological corruption, a somatic symbol of the decay within. This was not a natural disease. It was engineered suffering, inflicted to break resistance and enforce submission. The Church's complicity in these methods speaks to a deeper truth, that control over belief is often more valuable than truth itself. The seminary's tragedy is a cautionary tale about the dangers of blind obedience and the power structures that exploit it. Throughout history, secret societies and hidden agendas have sought to control populations by controlling belief. The events at Whitmore Seminary are a stark example of this in action. By corrupting the sacred, by weaponizing faith, the custodian and his conspirators revealed the fragility of institutions built on dogma. Their actions exposed how easily faith can be twisted into a tool of fear and domination. The students, innocent and hopeful, became victims of this manipulation, sacrificed to maintain the illusion of order. But what if the true power lay not in controlling others, but in awakening those who have been controlled. The knowledge buried in Whitmore's Black Book may hold keys not just to darkness, but to liberation, if one dares to seek it. The tragedy of Whitmore Seminary remains a dark mirror reflecting the consequences of unchecked power cloaked in righteousness. The story is not confined to history books. It's alive in every institution where truth is sacrificed for control, where silence is weaponized, and where the sacred is profaned for power. Every man who seeks mastery over himself and the world must look into this darkness, not to be consumed, but to understand the forces that shape reality behind the curtain. Remember, the path of awakening is perilous, filled with shadows that seek to deceive and destroy. But through knowledge, courage, and relentless questioning, you can break the chains forged in those frozen Pennsylvania woods nearly 2 centuries ago. The shadows are watching. The truth waits in silence. Will you claim it? The silence imposed by the church after the tragedy was not just to hide failure. It was to protect an entire system built on the control of minds and souls. The seminary was a testing ground, a proving ground for methods that would ripple through other institutions cloaked in holy purpose. The psychological mechanisms unleashed within those walls, fear, isolation, ritualized submission, became tools wielded far beyond Pennsylvania. They shaped clergy, leaders, and ultimately the structure of power across communities. The horrors suffered by those 49 students were a warning encoded in history. Power corrupts not only the individual, but the very institutions meant to uphold truth. This corruption festers in silence, fed by secrets carefully buried beneath layers of dogma and obedience. David Crane's survival was no miracle. It was a calculated mercy. He was spared, marked, and tasked with carrying a message hidden within his fragmented memories and cryptic letters. His accounts reveal not only the physical horrors but the psychological war waged against the students. The Shadows brand was more than metaphor. It was a psychological imprint, a trauma-based control designed to create perfect agents of doctrine, men stripped of free will, driven by terror and obedience. Crane's writings plead for awareness, warning that similar patterns of control persist today, though hidden beneath modern masks of authority. This legacy of psychological manipulation has seeped into political, religious, and social institutions, where the same techniques of fear and obedience are refined and deployed to maintain control over masses. The Black Book, long rumored to be destroyed, still whispers in shadows. Its origins trace back to ancient occult traditions merged with twisted theological interpretations, an unholy fusion designed to break minds and souls alike. This text promised enlightenment but delivered madness and death, exposing the fragile boundary between faith and fanaticism. The rituals described were never meant to heal or uplift, but to dominate and bend willpower. The custodian's role was to safeguard this knowledge, to ensure it was only revealed to those willing to pay the ultimate price. That price was the sanity and lives of young men who entered the seminary with hope and left broken, their fates sealed by forces beyond their understanding. Institutional manipulation is often hidden in plain sight, disguised as tradition or necessity. The Whitmore Seminary tragedy exposes how these facades are maintained by terror and control cloaked in sacred words. Each layer of doctrine, ritual, and hierarchy becomes a chain binding the individual, suppressing questions and dissent. The terrifying events of 1823 are an extreme example, but the mechanisms remain alive today, embedded in structures that shape belief and behavior. Recognizing these forces is the first step to breaking free from their grip. You, the seeker of hidden knowledge and self-mastery, must learn to discern the difference between truth and control, light and shadow. Those who wield power through fear are masters of deception. The Whitmore Seminary's faculty, church authorities, and shadowy custodian operated with ruthless efficiency, silencing doubts, suppressing evidence, and rewriting history. Their tactics were sophisticated, disguising cruelty as discipline, terror as spiritual trial, and control as divine mandate. This pattern repeats across history's darkest chapters. The men who walked those limestone halls were not just victims of circumstance. They were sacrificed to maintain a system where obedience is valued over humanity and silence over truth. Understanding this forces us to question who truly benefits when institutions bury inconvenient truths beneath layers of secrecy. The psychological control at Whitmore was a blueprint for creating obedient agents, individuals who could enforce dogma without question, wielding power through fear in their future ministries. This transformation was brutal and dehumanizing, designed to crush the spirit and instill absolute loyalty. The students' violent convulsions and blasphemous utterances were manifestations of their internal battle, a subconscious rebellion against the forced submission. These symptoms weren't madness but resistance, a final act of defiance before surrender. The seminary was less a place of learning and more a crucible of control, where souls were forged into weapons for institutional power. The unmarked graves behind the chapel are silent witnesses to the ultimate cost of institutional corruption. These young men, sons, brothers, future leaders, were erased not just from the physical world but from history itself. The Church's refusal to acknowledge their deaths beyond consumption is an attempt to sanitize a grotesque truth. But silence cannot erase the trauma etched into the land, the broken minds, or the suppressed letters of David Crane. The cemetery is a metaphor for forgotten victims everywhere, those crushed by systems that prioritize power over human life and truth. The tale of Whitmore's seminary demands reflection. How many tragedies have been hidden by institutional silence? How many minds broken to maintain control? The answer is uncomfortable because these mechanisms are universal. They exist wherever authority is unchecked and obedience demanded. The dark legacy of Whitmore calls us to vigilance and courage, to challenge those who wield power through fear, to expose the lies beneath sacred words, and to reclaim individual sovereignty. The journey into forbidden knowledge is perilous but necessary for true mastery over self and destiny. The custodian's identity remains shrouded in mystery, but his influence is undeniable. He was more than a man. He was a symbol of the dark heart beating beneath the seminary's holy facade. His rituals and manipulation were carefully crafted to exploit fear and faith, blending ancient occult secrets with institutional power. This fusion created a terrifying feedback loop where spiritual authority became psychological imprisonment. The custodian's legacy is a cautionary tale about how easily good intentions can be perverted by those craving control, and how the pursuit of power can consume even the purest souls. In the years following the seminary's closure, whispers of hauntings and curses echoed through Millbrook. Skeptics dismissed these as superstition, but those who knew the truth understood that the land itself was scarred. The unnatural deaths, the suppressed rituals, and the dark knowledge left behind created a spiritual wound, a gateway to shadows that linger still. These stories serve as warnings, reminders that places soaked in trauma and deception hold power beyond the physical. The past never fully dies. It waits in silence, watching and whispering truths to those who listen. Remember this well, true power lies not in domination but in awakening. The story of Whitmore Seminary is a descent into darkness, but also a call to rise, to see the chains for what they are and to break them, to reclaim the light buried beneath layers of fear and control. Each revelation in this story is a piece of a larger puzzle, an invitation to see beyond the lies and to master the forces shaping our world. The shadows will resist, but your resolve can be stronger. The journey is yours to choose. Now, I ask you once more, type this phrase twice in the comments. From darkness I rise. Let it be your declaration, your commitment to awakening and transformation. This is more than a ritual. It's a psychological lock-in, a signal to yourself and the community that you are ready to claim the truth and face the shadows head-on. Engage, commit, and prepare. The revelations ahead will challenge everything you thought you knew, but through them, you will gain power beyond measure. The mystery of Whitmore Seminary is a fragment of a larger, hidden history, one where knowledge is power, and power is jealously guarded through fear, silence, and manipulation. Institutions, whether religious, political, or social, have long used these tools to control narratives and suppress truth. Understanding this is essential for any man seeking mastery over his life and environment. You have now glimpsed the machinery behind one of history's darkest tragedies. But the machine is vast, and its gears grind quietly, unseen by most. Your role is to remain vigilant, to question, and to seek the truth no matter the cost. The shadows that envelop Whitmore Seminary stretch far beyond Pennsylvania, reaching into the heart of modern society. The deaths of those 49 young men are not just a story of past horror. They are a blueprint for control that continues to shape minds and destinies. The truth you've uncovered today is dangerous knowledge, one that changes everything. It is a call to rise above fear, to see through deception, and to reclaim your power as a master of your own fate. This is not the end, it is the beginning. The path forward is dark, but you are no longer walking it alone. Welcome to the awakening.